Have you ever walked out of a conversation thinking, how did we end up here? You said what you meant, you thought you were clear, but somehow the message either didn't land or it landed completely sideways. Well, this episode of The Brain Changes breaks down why that happens and what your brain has to do with it. Welcome to The Brain Changes, a podcast about learning how to revolutionize the way you think and live by mastering your mind. We're your hosts, mother and daughter duo Rebecca and Yvonne King from Moonbeam Monday. Our goal is to empower you to live the life you choose by teaching you how to retrain your brain. Some people tell us it sounds like mind control, and it is, but not the way you might think. This is about you taking control of your own mind rather than letting your mind control you, so you can choose to live a life free from the expectations of others. No matter what you've experienced in the past, you can create positive change and transformation by learning how to master your mind. We know this because we've done it. Between us, we've survived cancer and stroke and eliminated debilitating anxiety and depression. We've turned our pain into purpose through the power of our mind, and we're now here to support and guide you to do the same. In this podcast, we share valuable insights about how your brain works, why you think, say, and do the things you do, how to begin the process of change, and why it's necessary. Because we know that when you change your mind, you change your life. Thanks for joining us. Let's go. Hello and welcome back to the Brain Changes podcast. My name is Rebecca King and I'm here as always with my mum Yvonne. And over the next few episodes, we're going to be exploring how to master meaningful communication. So we all know how important communication is, of course, and this is especially for anyone who's ever found themselves in a conversation that went off track. I'm sure we can all relate to that. Not because someone was being difficult necessarily, but because something in the middle got a bit scrambled. A conversation with your partner perhaps turns into a misunderstanding. Maybe it was a team meeting where you leave thinking, did we even hear the same thing?
Yes, hello everyone. Today we are going to be looking at just exactly why that happens. And the answer isn't usually they weren't listening or that you didn't explain it right or I didn't explain it right. It's far more interesting than that even. One of the most powerful things I ever learned in NLP is this. We don't respond to the world as it is. We respond to the world as our brain filters it for us. And so every single one of us has an internal map which shapes our experiences, our memories, our values, our beliefs, our cultural conditioning, even trauma that we may have experienced in the past. And it's that map that decides what information gets through, what gets distorted, and what gets deleted entirely. And so here's where things get a bit fascinating. Most of that happens below the level of our awareness. So you're not purposely choosing to mishear someone or misunderstand them. Your brain is actually doing it for you. It's based on what it thinks matters most to you.
That's right. And this is where the science behind it kicks in. There's a structure in your brainstem. It's called the Reticular Activating System, or the RAS. Now, we talked about the RAS in terms of language in a recent episode. In this case, I want you to think about your RAS like your brain's gatekeeper. Right? Your brain has way too much information to process. So the gatekeeper, your RAS, it controls what sensory information gets through to your conscious mind. So to put this into context for you, at any given moment, so right now, in fact, you're exposed to over 2 million bits of information per second. So this is what we see, what we hear, what we think, the internal dialogue, even smells and tastes in some cases. But you can only consciously process around 134 bits of information per second. So it's a big difference. 2 million bits
Mm.
to 134 bits. Otherwise, we'd be in complete sensory overload if we had to process all of that. So your RAS, the gatekeeper, it goes, what's important here right now? And it makes a decision based on what you're focused on at that particular moment, what you believe or what you value, what your past experiences have taught you to expect. So it's filtering this information. And one of the most overlooked filters is your representational system or your preferred sensory style. So we categorize these into four primary systems. We fit into each one of them, but we have a primary, and the four primaries are visual. So this is a person who thinks in images and symbols, for example. Then we have auditory. So this is a person who processes through tone and rhythm and even a little bit of internal dialogue. The kinesthetic person then is more oriented around sensation and feeling. And then there's the auditory digital. And this is someone who processes via logic, structure, and language.
That's right. And of course, we can or do use all four of these, but most of us have a dominant one or one that we prefer. And this does affect how we speak, how we think, and how we connect. So let me give you an example of this. A visual person might say, that looks like a great idea, while a kinesthetic person might say something like, that feels right. Neither's wrong, but if you're trying to build a connection and you're speaking a completely different sensory language to the person that you're speaking with, it can feel like you're talking past each other, that you're not forming that real connection. And because this is mostly unconscious, remember, we're not totally aware of this, people often don't realize why the conversation feels a bit off. As I said, you just feel that you're not connecting correctly. So they just know that they didn't perhaps feel heard, or like the other person didn't really get it. And this is why emotional intelligence isn't just about being self-aware or empathetic. It's about knowing that, or knowing how someone else thinks. That's just as important as actually what we're saying to them.
Mm.
So when we talk about communication as a school, we often jump straight to what we're saying, how we're going to say something or how we're going to phrase something. But in actual fact, the real skill lies in knowing just how to recognize the filters that the other person is using, and then adjusting your approach so that your message will be heard in their language.
That's right. And this is essentially where the science becomes an art, isn't it? When you start tuning into someone else's language. So
Mm.
we tune into their pace, their tone, the kinds of words they use. It's like you're getting a live feed of their internal world, what's actually happening inside them. And when you match their style, even if you do this subtly, you create something really important in communication, and that is rapport.
Yes. Mm.
So, in neuroscience terms, rapport actually creates a sense of psychological safety. And we've heard this a lot, especially recently. This is a really important piece, and we hear it a lot in the workplace space as well. And what happens when we create that psychological safety? It activates parts of the brain like the anterior cingulate cortex and the insular regions involved in empathy, trust, and connection, like you were talking about before, Mum. And of course, a big part of, or what we get from communication is that connection.
Yes.
So when we talk about communication, we're not just talking about fluffy people skills. We're not just talking about, like you were saying, how we get up and deliver information, speaking clearly, and considering the actual words that you use. We're actually talking about brain science here.
So let's just try and make this practical, because the way we change something or create a new pattern is to practice it. So I I'm just going to suggest here that this week, just pick one person that you regularly interact with. It could be your partner, it could be your child, it could be someone at work, or maybe a client. So start off by listening to their language and notice what they say. Do they say things like, that doesn't look right? Because that would be a clue that that's a visual type of person. That's the way they hear things. Or do they say something like, I'm not comfortable with this? That would be kinesthetic. Maybe they'd say something like, let me think it through. And we know by that language that they would be an auditory digital person. That's the way they hear information. So once you get used to spotting this, start to mirror their style just a little bit. Respond using the same type of language. This isn't faking it. What we're doing here is we're learning to speak their language. And we're giving our message a better chance of landing with them. And we're also developing that rapport with that person. So that is going to make communication and connection so much more easier for us and more valuable for us.
Yeah, that's right. And even just hearing you explain those, there's a couple of other clues that we can perhaps throw in there as well if you want to help you identify the representational system of someone else. Speaking of visual, these people are often uh, wearing color, or they have color around them. Appearances, not in a vain way, but appearances are important to them. For an auditory person, often you'll find that they turn their ear toward you. That's just a tiny little subtle clue. Kinesthetic people do tend to be those people who come into your space. So, for somebody who's not so kinesthetic, they might see or feel that and be like, whoa, I need to take a step back. It's just them, they feel that energy. And then an auditory digital person, one of the things that I've noticed with these people is because they process and it's almost like they're repeating everything back to themselves that you've said in their head. They might take a little bit longer to answer than you might if you're say a visual or an auditory person. So there's lots of little clues that you can pick up on there to help identify these representational systems. So much of what goes wrong with or in communication, it's not about our intention, it's about translation. And this is such a simple shift, but one that we've seen completely change how people actually show up in difficult conversations, isn't it? And the more aware you become of your own filters and other people's preferences, the more you can build trust. You can diffuse tension, which often happens with misunderstandings, and you can actually get the message through. So sometimes all it takes is a little, you get me, to turn things around, that the other person feels like you've actually heard them and understood.
That's right.
So, to wrap this episode up, much of what goes wrong with communication, as I said, isn't about intention, it's about translation. So, today we've explored why the brain filters what it hears, how the reticular activating system, or the RAS, decides what gets through, and how our preferred sensory styles shape every conversation that we have. And so when we start to recognize those patterns in ourselves and in others, we stop taking miscommunication so personally and we start building bridges instead.
That's right. Today we've talked about some simple ways that we can begin to communicate with people on perhaps on a different level. So if you're able to do as we suggested today, practice, listen for someone's sensory language and experiment with mirroring it. And you might be just surprised how quickly things can shift for you. So, in the next episode, we're going to explore what we call meta programs. These are the hidden patterns behind how people make decisions, how they might respond to pressure, and actually what motivates them. And if you've ever wondered why smart people still seem to talk past each other, well, you won't want to miss this episode. So that's all we have time for today, but thank you for listening to the Brain Changes podcast. If you know someone that you know would benefit from this episode, it would be helpful to let them know where you can access this and get them to share.
Yeah, and please remember to follow and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. We'd love for you to leave a comment and a review to help more people find us. We really appreciate that. All right, that's it for today. Until next time, remember, as always, when you change your mind, you change your life. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Brain Changes. We hope you've enjoyed the conversation today. Please like and subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest episodes. Our mission is to reach as many people as possible to help them revolutionize the way they think so they can change their brain and create profound transformation. Please help us broaden our reach by sharing this episode with someone you know will benefit. And remember to tag us on socials at Moonbeam Monday and leave a review. And remember, when you change your mind, you change your life. We'll catch you next time for another episode of The Brain Changes.